But the deal with all this thing is that in '94 I was working at Charles Schwab, the discount brokerage. I saw a lot of people helping each other out, particularly on the Well and Usenet news groups. And I figured by the time '95 rolled around, I would, what I would do is just basically, I'm going to back up a bit. Again, as I saw all this stuff happening, especially, again, sometimes I would see even doctors giving away expensive time trying to diagnose someone online. Not easy, and some interesting liability issues, but nevertheless they persisted. So I figured I'd help out and try to give back a little bit. All I can think of, and this is the beginning of the internet boom in '95, I figured I would tell people about what I thought were cool events, arts and technology events, like the Anand Salon, which continues to this day. Fundraiser for Climate Theater in San Francisco, also a party for, these days, for Burning Man people. And I'm not exactly a burner, but it's still a pretty good institution there. There was also Joe's Digital Diner, which basically involved people getting together for a big spaghetti dinner and using the newer multimedia techniques for new forms of storytelling, nonlinear storytelling, because you could do that even with the Mac technology back then. So this was pretty good, and I figured, well, I'll start this simple mailing list. 10 to 12 friends, I would talk about events like this, and then people started to pass the thing around. People responded by sending me notices of more events, and people also started to suggest other kinds of things to put on this list. I said, hey, about apartments. People said jobs, stuff for sale, and that kind of thing. And that began a pattern which continues to this day under Jim Buckmaster, and he's the guy who really makes things work. Jumping ahead a bit, I hired him for a senior position in 2000, and in that time frame also, people helped me understand that as a manager, I kind of suck. And he's very good at it. He's a natural, so again, and customer service is something that I am good at, so that's a natural combination. But the ideal is that we just kept doing things, listening, doing more, and then listening some more. And that worked out pretty well. The first blip occurred maybe in the middle of '95 when the simple CC list mechanism I was using broke at about 240 email addresses. And then I had to use a real listserv for that. A friend offered Major Domo, and I had to give a thing a name. I was going to call it SF Events, because it was still mostly events then, and as a nerd, I'm pretty literal, which is always a pleasure to deal with, I'm sure. But people around me said, hey, we call it, they already called it Craigslist, and calling it that would signify that it would be personal and quirky. And they were right, and that's worked out. The principal guy saying that actually is a guy named Anthony Batt, who's co-founder of a pretty successful music-related social networking site called BuzzNet out of LA. And it's still somewhat under the radar, but it keeps increasing in traffic and so on, and is pretty popular now, I guess, among the kids. So just kept plugging away from there. Late '95, I remembered that I am a programmer, or was, and I could write some code which turns all this email into web pages. So I had instant publishing, and that worked out pretty well. That's why I could just direct people to a website, because for us all, even now, sometimes for some stuff you prefer to go to a site, and sometimes you prefer to just get stuff in your inbox. We all have different styles for different purposes. Just kept doing that. But again, a part of this was that, well, if someone wanted to get hold of me, it was very easy to do so, and you could just email me, and almost always I respond. And even that's the pattern now. My email address is craig@craigslist.org. I do get a lot of spam, and sometimes if something goes in the spam folder, I may miss it. I've found that happens once every few days or so. But that's how to get hold of me. The only mistake I've made saying it in public was on The View once. And by the time I got back to the hotel room, I had 250 emails with 100 more to come. If I ever do that again, I'll tell people that I'll be using a form letter to respond. But that's actually doable. The only scary thing about the show was Star Jones. And I'm still afraid of her. Yeah. But this marked the beginning of a pattern of continuous engagement. The idea is that we try really hard to be engaged with our community, to do customer service or whatever, seriously, with real commitment on an ongoing basis. From the very beginning and even from now, partly on a gut level for me, that's because my name's on the thing. So I take things personally, and that works out. A related observation from that specific time frame is that what people like Anthony pointed out to me, that I had accidentally created a brand. Now, speaking as a nerd, particularly back then, I had no idea what a brand really was, except in some very loose civilian sense. And that, but I kind of began to get it back then, and just figured I should maintain that brand or with some kind of integrity. I use that terminology only because I've spoken in the recent past with marketing and PR kind of people, trying to contain my bitterness, because I figure marketing and PR people were the popular kids in high school. So the deal was just, through the years of the late 90s, just kept on plugging away with things. End of 97, a few milestones, hit 1 million page views per month, which back then was pretty good, especially for some half-assed amateur site. Microsoft Sidewalk people approached me about running banner ads, and I decided that I dislike banner ads, and they kind of slow a site down, so said no banner ads, by extension no pop-ups. And then also some folks approached me about running the site on a volunteer basis. So I said sure, because in that time frame, whenever something started to take more of my time, I would just write some code, and that would, if I could automate or semi-automate a process, that relieved a lot of my time, but I could still see it growing, so a volunteer thing sounded pretty good. For those of you who are technical, and I don't know the mix exactly, I was using an old email tool called Pine. Character mode, no point and click. If you're technical, by the way, this is hilarious. And not only that, but for quite a while, our database consisted of email folders. I would write code which would reach into them and then just generate HTML. Again, for the geek and nerd population, just hilarious. But kept on with this. 98, well, a difficult lesson. I didn't exert enough leadership, and trying to run things on a volunteer basis that way doesn't work. End of 98, some people corner me and help me get out of denial about that. In 99, I make the thing into a real company, because some things are better run on a company basis, on a nominally for-profit basis, like it means getting lawyers and getting corporate papers and all that kind of jazz, and finding various means to protect yourself. Frankly, in this time frame, I made some big mistakes, and it was painful recovering from some of them. I didn't listen to some advice. I was lazy about it, and didn't do some things that I should have done regarding advice. Some of the things I can't talk about under a contractual basis. But in 99, again, as part of this idea of continuous engagement, I asked people in our community, hey, what's the right way to pay the bills and maybe do better than that? And they said, well, what we should do is charge advertisers who already paid far too much money for less effective ads. Because, buying classifieds, even if it's the cheap kind of one for, let's say, a roommate, that's expensive normally, and I'd rather see people who need to find a roommate or whatever keep that money. I mean, we could charge for that too and give it to philanthropy, but sometimes getting through the day is hard, and if we can save you 40 bucks or 100 bucks, that ain't bad, and maybe that's real philanthropy right there.